Welcome to the Firehouse Roundtable podcast, brought to you by the Ventura Fire Foundation. My name's Peter McKenzie. I'm one of the hosts. I'm a retired fire captain with the City of Ventura Fire Department.
And I'm Jason Kay. I'm an active fire captain also with the Ventura Fire Department.
And we are excited that you are going to spend some time with us at the kitchen table, learning about firehouse issues that we're trying to bring awareness to.
Thanks for joining us as we discuss the issues of being a firefighter, both on and off duty, and how it affects us.
Let's get right to it. All right, welcome to another episode of the Firehouse Roundtable. How you doing, Jason?
I'm good. I had a good week. How about yourself?
You know, I had a good week. I'm excited about our episode today. We got Will Nackers coming, and he's got quite a story, which I'm excited to share with everyone.
It took me years, maybe not years, but a long time to be able to pry the real story out of Will. You know, he's such a big talker. We'll see if we can get him to say more than 4 words in a row today. But I'm excited to hear about all of his adventures in his life. He's had a super exciting life. I was actually his direct supervisor for a while, and I was honored to have him on my crew. And at the end of his time with me, we realized how actually alike we are. So it'll be a good episode.
Oh, that's interesting. We might need to go deeper into that little piece there. I didn't put you and him as very alike, but maybe you are. No, let's get into it. A lot of these stories are pretty heavy and personal, and I think he's going to open up. So should we bring him on?
Yeah, here we go.
All right. Welcome to the show, Will.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're excited about bringing you on and getting into your story. And I think probably a good place to start is tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you come from. Just let's get those things out of the way if you're good.
All right. Yeah, sounds good. So born and raised in Green Bay, Wisconsin, a small town of Seymour, Wisconsin is where I actually grew up, went to high school, immediately enlisted into the Marine Corps for 4 years. After that, got my associate's degree in fire science, spent 7 years in New Mexico, Los Alamos, New Mexico as a firefighter paramedic. And then I've been here in Ventura City for 5 years, hopefully staying here to retire. So,
yeah, hopefully you stick around for a while. I think everybody's happy to have you on the department. How about family, kids? Just kind of let everybody know where you're at with that stuff.
Half of my life is the fire service. The other half is my family. Between the two, I couldn't tell you who I love more. Just kidding. Obviously, my family, my wife, Christine, we've been married over 10 years, I think. We made that milestone. And obviously, I have my daughter, Grace. She's 12 years old, super dedicated to swimming, and she's great with school, does music. And then I have my son, Grady, who's 10 years old. He just loves to do any kind of sport, but he's in soccer mostly. He swims as well, mostly for the benefit of swimming. But I can't say enough about those two kids and how proud I am of them and how special they are to me. So,
congrats on your 10-year wedding anniversary. I'd love for you to start with a super fast story about you and your wife's first date, because that's one of my favorite funny stories about you.
Which version did I tell you, though?
The one where she stole your ID at the bar.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember how we met, but I don't know how in depth I went with you. But so basically, in the Marine Corps, I'm getting out, and it's our last weekend. There was actually a few Marines that were sent back from our deployment. The rest of our battalion had to take a boat back, but they sent us on an airplane because if they didn't, we would have been held past our enlistment date, and they would have been in trouble, basically, or had to pay us more money of some sort. So they flew us back, about 6-8 of us. So it was our last weekend together before we all went our separate ways in our next chapter in life. And so we're like, hey, we need to go do something, one last hurrah together. And somehow our choice was Huntington Beach. So we're based in Camp Pendleton by San Clemente. And we're like, hey, we never really raised hell up in Huntington Beach. Let's go there and find some trouble. And so we all agreed to that. So we get a hotel up on the beach in Huntington Beach. Obviously, as Marines do, they go out, have some drinks at some bars. One of the bars we were at, it actually happened to be Cinco de Mayo. So it was I had no idea it was Cinco de Mayo or what that meant. Basically coming from Wisconsin, And being in the Marine Corps, you don't pay attention to holidays too much. So we're out. Coincidentally, my future wife was in the same bar. Her friend just drug her out. She wanted to go out and have some drinks, so she came out with her friend reluctantly. So basically, a bunch of Marines were having fun. And my wife at the time was like stuck at the bar, not having fun. I think she was talking to some old guy, she said. And her friend disappeared like after she said that she was going to go to the bathroom. And so she's looking for a friend, left her with this old guy. And so she's looking around and she sees her friend talking to obviously a bunch of Marines. And my wife obviously wasn't too fond of Marines. Most people in California are aware of Marines when they go out and have a good time. So she was, again, reluctant to come over and have her friend. Her friend was like, oh, I'm having so much fun. Met these guys. And so I started talking to her, and she's like playing hard to get, basically. I don't want to say I'm a Marine because I know like the civilians aren't really open to us. So I'm making up a profession. And I basically say I'm a firefighter because I knew that was what I wanted to do next. So I was like, oh, yeah, I'm a firefighter. And she's like, oh, okay. She's like, yeah, I work for the FBI. And I was like, oh, really? Like, well, tell me something about me. Like, what's my birth date? And at some point with us talking, she had stolen my wallet out of my back pocket, looked at my information, remembered it, and then put it back. And so she was telling me my birthday, like my address, where I came from. And I was like, oh, man, maybe she is with the FBI. And so basically our relationship started off with us telling stories of two different professions. But basically in the end, we figured out we had the same sense of humor, personalities. So
that's awesome, man. I love it. I love to hear it.
Yeah.
So speaking of that stuff, Will, do you want to start out giving us kind of the initial, how you got into the Marines and then what happened with I know you've been on a couple of deployments and how you ended up getting some cool scars.
Yeah. Chicks love scars. So I think I should probably dive all the way back into little Will when he was just young little boy. Typically when you ask a kid, like what do they want to be when they grow up? I specifically remember telling people I either wanted to play for the Green Bay Packers or I wanted to fight in a war. Like those were my exact words. And I'm sure like people were disturbed by the second part of that. But I think for whatever reason, it was just born into me of wanting to, be a protector, fighter, and so forth. Going up through school, like I already kind of had that in the back of my head. Like, how is this all going to play out? And then eventually you see the Marine Corps commercial that comes up. The guy slaying the dragon with the sword. Have no idea really what that means, but it was cool at the time. So that's when I found out like what the Marine Corps was all about. Looked into them, and right away they're like first to fight, hardest in the branches of the military. So I was like, well, that seems like a good idea for what I'm looking for. And so I chose the Marine Corps based off of that. My freshman year, I walked into the Marine recruiter office. And I said, I want to join. And he's like, how old are you? I'm like, I'm a freshman in high school. He's like, are you kidding me? Like, you need to come back in 2 years. And I was like super devastated. Like I couldn't even enlist right away. So like, all right, fine. So I come back my junior year in high school. I'm like, hey, I'm back. I'm ready to enlist. And they're all right, cool. We'll sign you up. What do you want to do? I'm like, infantry. All right, great. It was like the easiest thing for a recruiter, for a guy to walk in, know exactly what he wants to do. Basically the easiest thing for them to sign you up in. Part of being enlisted so early is that I was able to recruit some of my other guys in high school, and they enlisted and basically got a promotion before I even went to boot camp.
Wait a second. So because you went early and then you brought some friends along, you got some sort of increase in rank because of that?
Yep.
That's crazy. What did your mom and dad, what did your parents think of this when you showed up in your freshman year trying to enlist?
I know like my mom was always devastated. Obviously she didn't want me to go. And my dad would just always tell me like, you're just going to go be a ditch digger. Like, what are you doing? Like, you can do something better than that.
What year was this, by the way? Were we at war? Was like Iraq going on, or what was there any conflicts that were happening?
No. So when I enlisted, it probably would have been like 2000, because obviously 2000,
Okay, so
or maybe it was 2001, prior to September 11th.
gotcha. So things were relatively calm.
Yeah,
wasn't like you.
There was no wars
Gotcha.
going on. Anything I would have known about, maybe Desert Storm, but obviously we didn't do anything in that war. But Iraq was a continuation of that. So
Okay, so you recruited your friends, get enlisted, and then pick it up from there.
I'm enlisted. My parents, since I was 17, my parents did actually have to sign me off to the military. It's not like I couldn't have gone, because I would have turned 18 in my senior year, but they did still sign me off when I was 17. So I'm signed up. Everything's ready to go. And then all I needed was my high school diploma. They're like, that's the last thing we need. Like, graduate and you're good to go. And so all I had to do was graduate. I got my diploma up on stage. Literally the next day, I shipped down to Milwaukee to fly out to boot camp to San Diego. And all my friends were like, oh, you need to stay this summer. We're going to have all these cool drunk parties in the cornfields and hang out with our friends one last time. I was like, nah, I think I'm good. Like, I'm going to get out of here.
That doesn't seem like you. So you went to an infantry division, which the recruiter, that's the one that they always are trying to fill, right? So it was perfect for him. You came in with the job he's trying to fill the most. He said, I'll take that one and send me as soon as you can. So you're the recruiter's dream.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, they want those guys to come in and be like, hey, this is what I want. There's nothing wrong with me. I don't have any ailments, no allergies. Like, the easiest bonus for that recruiter for sure.
Okay, so now you're in the Marines. You go down to Milwaukee for boot camp.
Yeah. So I should back up just for a second, probably for follow-up stuff. But my junior year after I enlisted, that would have been September 11th, 2001. Obviously, that's when the World Trade happened. So I came to school in the morning. My first class was wood workshop, and the teacher wasn't in there. Like, we were wondering where he was. He never showed up. Eventually, he walks in. He's pushing, the old school cart with the TV on it. He pushes that in the classroom. He plugs it in, turns on the news channel, and then basically just like walks away. And so we're all sitting there watching. And at that point, like, one of the towers, I think, maybe had collapsed or was already smoking from the plane being crashed into it. And so me watching this, like, only being infuriated that I'm enlisted in the Marine Corps, but obviously I'm not at the point where I can be sent off if a war starts. So I'm just like super angry, wanting to go right then and there. And like, since that happened, I would always go to the library and then have the newspaper, and I'd go and look at the newspaper, and every day was front page, like Marine Corps, Marines invade Iraq, Marines are in Kuwait. Like, every day I'm having to read this stuff. I'm like, I'm going to miss, like, the first thing that I wanted to sign up for was the first to fight. And I missed the whole war, like, by the time I even get to boot camp. So you can understand, like, how devastated I was, but only to actually find out that I didn't miss anything.
Yeah, let me interrupt you there. I would say that most people in those shoes would see that and get scared and go, "Oh my goodness, what did I do? I signed up for the military and now there's a war that's starting." So you're definitely a unique breed that you are literally chomping at the bit, like, get me over there as fast as possible.
No different than being a firefighter, right? Like, we want to go to structure fires. Like, we're not afraid of it. That's kind of what we want to do.
Yeah, for sure. So let's fast forward to you've gone through your training. You're now, let's get up to where you had your injury.
Yeah. So now I'm in the Marine Corps, finished boot camp. There's a School of Infantry. The infantry, you can actually make a choice to do something within the infantry. There's a job within the job, big type thing. So I chose 0351, which is anti-tank assaultman. Like, they give you a list of what you want to, like, apply for. And I was like, well, that sounds interesting. You get C4 explosives, rocket launchers, and heat-seeking missiles. I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. So I applied for that, and then I got accepted into that. So that's what my School of Infantry was actually being trained in that 51 position, specifically with C4 and the rockets and all that stuff. Like going to a range and letting you just play with C4 is a pretty fun experience in itself. So that was my job. So when I go to my first unit, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, I get sent to weapons company because I'm an 0351. Pretty much within a month, they're like, we're deploying and we're flying directly to Kuwait. And from there, we drive all the way to our Ramadi, Iraq. And in Ramadi, we were relieving a National Guard unit that had been there. And we were basically, our base was Saddam Hussein's son's palace. Across the river was Saddam's palace. Our initial mission that they told us was winning the hearts and minds of the civilians. And so we were just to go around, hand out water, food, just be a friendly face. But quickly, it ended up becoming some of the worst firefights and battles. They bury bombs and lay bombs throughout the city and in the streets. And they typically were detonating them by line of sight with cell phones or radio transmissions and stuff like that. So when it came down to my injury, one of the mornings we had a mission. We were going to hold security at an intersection in kind of the downtown area of Ramadi. Our company officer, he decided he wanted to take a drive to the Arches of Death, is what we called them, the entry into Ramadi. There's 2 arches, one for going in and one for going out. And everyone just called them the Arches of Death because you're coming into Ramadi and obviously there's a lot of death and destruction. And we're all like, are you serious? Like, we all know what's going to happen. And I think what he wanted to do was either get into a firefight or find more IEDs in the road. And so sure enough, that's what we did. It was unusual to have a company officer come out with you. So typically when they come out, like they want to be in the action and like see what's going on. So we get down to the arches, we turn around, we're coming back. I remember exactly what I was thinking about. I guess I should tell you my position in the Humvee. We call them high back Humvees. They're the Humvees where you basically have the 2 driver, passenger, and then the back is the open bed. So we had 6 Marines in the back, and I was up front right behind the driver's seat, and I was just looking out to my left for anyone shooting or whatever, something bad going on. So I was always looking out left, and I would always put my leg up on the driver's seat so I could kind of swivel myself a little more outboard. So as we're driving, like I specifically remember, I'm thinking about when we get back, there's a army base that's next to ours, and we were headed there, and they had much better egg omelets than we did. So that's all I was thinking about is like, oh man, what kind of egg omelet am I going to get? Like, am I going to stick with the usual? Like, or what am I going to eat? And as I'm thinking about that, the next thing I know, I'm waking up from being unconscious. And I was like, what was that? Like, I started to come around. I'm like, oh, that's what being hit by an IED feels like. Like I got knocked unconscious. So basically what happened, there was a 155-pound artillery shell buried in the road. And as we drove over it, we're directly over it. That's when they detonated it. So just being that close to the blast of a bomb, the concussion of the explosion, as most firemen know about, that knocked us all out. So the entire Humvee was just unconscious for several seconds. And we all kind of come to realize what had happened. As I'm waking to, like figuring out what's going on, like what do I need to do? The corporal in the back, he was like, hey, is anyone hurt? And I think I was the only one to speak up, like, I feel something in my leg. And he's like, whatever, get out and hold security. Because we all knew our sergeant, who was in the front driver's seat, he was incredibly gung-ho. And anytime anything happened, he'd be the first one getting out, screaming, yelling, and like, let's go get him. And we all knew, like, he was silent. Obviously, he hadn't moved, so we knew he was injured pretty bad. We had to get him some help. So the corporal ordered us all out. We all get out and hold like security circle around the Humvee. so the next corpsman who's closest can come assess him. And so when that corporal finally got to me, he's like, "Hey, are you okay?" I was like, "Nah, something's wrong with my leg." And he goes to touch it, and his hand like goes up into my thigh. And he's like, "Gross, dude, you're hurt. Like, you need to see the corpsman." And so I'm like, "Okay." And so I go run to the other Humvee who has the corpsman in it, and there's already a corpsman taking care of our sergeant. And so I go to the other one we have, and I get to the Humvee, and it's like, "Hey, I was hitting the leg. Like, can you take a look at it?" So the corpsman, all he does is sees it's a big gaping wound. And so he throws like a Israeli dressing on it, a trauma dressing, throws it on tight. And as he's putting that on, the gunner in that Humvee was, telling me like, "Hey, you're a wuss, like, get back and fight," like just typical Marine stuff, right? Like stuff that we would do each other. Like, "Hey, you're a wuss, like, stop being a baby." I remember him telling me that, like, you jerk. Like, I got hurt. So there was another Marine outpost just down the road from where we were. They're cutting my pants off. They're looking at my leg, and they're like, "Oh, you're not that bad. Like, you'll go to Baghdad, you'll come back. Like, the injury's not that bad." I'm like, "Okay, sounds good." I immediately go to the surgery in Baghdad, and next thing I know, I'm laying in bed, coming awake from being under anesthesia, and the surgeon walks in with a little urine cup with 2 pieces of shrapnel in it. He's like, "Hey, here you go. Like, we removed these from your leg. Everything's good. Like, you have a open wound for a while that you have to let it grow back. But otherwise you're fine." And so one of the pieces of metal from the bomb itself was in the bottom of my thigh. And then the other piece of shrapnel was lodged in my knee. And then looking at my gear afterwards, like, there's shredded holes like throughout everything. I have no idea how I only got hit by those 2 little pieces. Basically, I think it's just lucky that I have fat thighs. That's probably what's in me.
So you're in the convoy. How many Humvees are in the convoy that you're driving around with?
It's those things you forget, but there's usually like 5 or 6.
Was your Humvee the only one that got hit, or did a couple others, were they affected by the blast too?
Yeah, so since we drive so far apart, ours was the only Humvee that was directly over. And then there was no one else that got affected. I found out later, after I had left to go be medevaced, one of the other Humvees in our unit was parked off to the side. The corporal from that Humvee was kind of walking back to it. The driver was standing outside the door, and he was like, "There's another IED, get back in and move." And as soon as he got in and closed the door, they detonated that IED, but no one was injured from that. So that was their only like secondary attack that they attempted on us. They just had 2 different bombs buried in the area.
Yeah, that was going to be my question, was there any fighting after they exploded? It doesn't sound like it.
No, just that secondary bomb they placed.
Gotcha. So what did your recovery look like? Did you ever make it back out onto the battlefield or no?
No, so that was about 4 months into our deployment. Even though that original doc told me like I was fine. From Baghdad, they flew me to Germany. I stayed there for about 3 days, and then they flew me back to Camp Pendleton. And then that's where I stayed until the rest of my unit came back about 4 months later. And so, like I said, I had a big wound, like a softball-sized open wound in my leg. And I guess the way to treat it was I had to put wet gauze on every day. And then twice a day, I had to rip it off when it was dried. And that would provide like regrowing of the skin and flesh. So every time I did that, I'd rip off the old stuff, new stuff would grow. And I did that for a month.
That sounds painful. Was that painful?
I don't remember it being painful.
Gotcha.
The only time that it actually was painful was when I got to Germany and I finally looked at it like 3 days later. And then that's when the pain started.
Yeah, your mind kept it at bay, and then once you like saw it, that was it. Then it started hurting. That's crazy too.
After you were back in Pendleton, how long was the recovery?
So I had a month of doing that open wound dressing twice a day. And then after that, I went back to the Camp Pendleton Hospital. And then they finally just sewed it up. And that was the other painful part. They just gave me local anesthetic. They didn't put me under. And so they were like burning skin to like take off the old stuff. And then they were sewing it up. And I was like, I can feel this the whole time. Hey guys, like, can you give me something else? And they're like, we're almost done.
That's no good. Done. So then the rest of your time with the Marines, did you go back ever?
Yeah, absolutely. So pretty much that 4 months waiting for my unit to come back from that Iraq deployment was kind of like my recovery time. I didn't really do too much PT or physical fitness. Probably went to the gym a little bit. But as soon as my unit got back, they knew I was fine. And I just got thrown right back into my platoon and right back to the daily routine of being in the Marine Corps. Our next deployment after that was to Okinawa. We did some general training there. And then we did another deployment to Iraq in 2006-07.
Was that hard to go back to Iraq after what happened the first time you were there?
Yeah, I didn't realize it until a few months in. The second time wasn't nearly as bad. We were told we were going into like a wave of insurgency, and this terrorist group had taken over this town and they were just running the streets. So that was kind of nerve-wracking to have to come back and be told like you're going right back into it. To mentally prepare for that was tough. But thankfully when we got into that town, like it was crickets, like there was no one there. The streets were empty. So nothing happens. And pretty much at that time, they had invented pressure plate IEDs. So pretty much when the Humvee drives over the bomb, the two pieces of metal touch, and then that's what detonates it. So they would never even have to be in the area anymore. They could just bury those pressure plate IEDs and walk away, and then we drive over them, and then the damage is done, and they're nowhere in the area. So that was kind of like the thing they came up with then. And so it was just kind of that stuff nonstop, just driving over more IEDs, which is more stressful than probably being shot at. So that became more of a mental issue, dealing with that. And then having, for whatever reason, I think it's because it was so slow, they would split our platoon up. And so only 3 Humvees would go out, like patrol an area, come back, and then the other half would go out, patrol the area, and come back. And I think that's what became like weighed more on me. Like half of our platoon would go out, they would drive over an IED, and we would hear about it. And I think that affected me more of like knowing that one of our guys got hurt again or possibly killed. Like I couldn't really handle that part of it anymore. So that became hard. And like I didn't want to do that anymore. So that's pretty much when I realized like once we get out of this and I'm done, like that was the end of my 4 years. Definitely going to get out.
Yeah, that's quite a story. You got a Purple Heart from that injury, correct?
Yes. So being injured by the enemy is the only way to get a Purple Heart.
What does that look like? Like, I mean, I think everybody knows what a Purple Heart is, but what happens when you get a Purple Heart? Is there a ceremony? Is there walk us through that process?
There is a ceremony, like any battalion function or awards, like kind of how we would do it in the fire service. We would set a date. Everyone would show up in their Class A's, and the chief would talk, and everyone would line up who was getting a medal, and then you'd get pinned with your medal. They did it a few times, like while in Iraq. Some of the guys got injured. Typically it's just like a graze here or there, but regardless, it's still worthy of a Purple Heart. So they would do ceremonies there, but since I wasn't there, obviously, how they gave me mine, I was laying in bed in the hospital in Camp Pendleton, and like some office paper battalion chief walks in with the Purple Heart. So I don't remember what he said, like blah, blah, blah. Thanks for your service. He pinned the Purple Heart on my chest as I'm laying in bed in Camp Pendleton. I think I had some dumb like gray shirt on or something, but I think at least my parents were there at that time. So that was my official opinion of my Purple Heart.
Interesting. Yeah, it sounds very anticlimactic.
Hey, this is Joe Booth from the Ventura Fire Foundation. To learn more about the foundation and our programs, visit our website at www.venturafirefoundation.org. 100% of our funding comes from generous donors. And if you like what we're doing, I encourage you to become a donor. It's very easy. Just go to our website, again that's venturafirefoundation.org, and click the red donate button at the top. Whether it's $5 or $5,000, every donation helps ensure local firefighters thrive.
So obviously getting injured like that had an effect on your mental health for sure, right? I don't know how it couldn't. Are you open to like sharing like what that did to you? Because obviously in the fire service, especially with what we're doing with the foundation, we're trying to shed light on the mental health aspects. Like, clearly the military is like, I would say, more on the forefront of this whole push towards acknowledging this stuff and getting help than the fire service. I think the fire service is like definitely behind the times, but you've lived both worlds and you've had arguably, one of the most tragic things that could ever happen to someone. So what did that do to your mental health? And like, I assume it wasn't just something that happened. It happened over time and evolved and developed. If you're open to sharing what that looks like, I think it would be helpful to the listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So like how it affects you being so young as well. Like obviously that was being young at the time was super helpful because I wanted a Purple Heart. Like that was my goal. Like, oh, I'm going to get a Purple Heart out of this. Like I want to get shot. Obviously being young and naive, like you don't know what else comes along with that. And so obviously my sergeant was killed in the same explosion that I was in. And I was the only second worst wounded. And so it was him being killed and me being wounded. And so I don't think any of that really registered until, like I was saying earlier, that second deployment to Iraq is kind of where it started settling in, like to where feelings that I couldn't really control. And that was just not wanting to lose another friend or seeing anyone else get hurt. So I think that's what started to weigh on me, like those feelings and starting to settle in. And so that was, years later after actually being wounded and having that whole traumatic experience, whether that's like the ability for us to push those feelings down for a good amount of time. But obviously they're going to come up at some point. And I was helping myself basically with alcohol, whether I knew it or not. It's kind of hard to differentiate when you're in the Marine Corps and if alcohol is a problem or not, because we're all Marines and we all drink. Like if we have a minute off, we're going to go get drunk. Like that's just how it works. So it was hard to like understand if I was just drinking because I'm a young kid and I'm just trying to have fun, or was I drinking to like get away from those feelings. So unfortunately, none of that really came out until I left the Marine Corps. And my goal after getting out was to become a local at a bar in Wisconsin. Like those were my only aspirations. So obviously that was kind of all still a part of like the mental issues I was dealing with, not wanting to address them or basically understand. And that was probably the biggest thing of like understanding like what I went through. I didn't talk to anyone. No one came up to me and said, hey, like you were through some pretty heavy scenarios. You should probably get help. And that was probably brought up. But obviously, like I said, being young and ignorant, I was like, no, I don't want to talk to anyone about my feelings and so forth.
When you went back to Iraq the second time and you knew that this was something that was weighing on you, there was no like support on the ground there that you could have got or offered to you or anything like that? You just kind of dealt with it yourself? Or
yeah, I would say like if I thought something was wrong, I probably would have went to our corpsman in our platoon, and then he would have addressed that further, like medically. But there was never like, if your feelings are hurt, you need to talk to this person. especially in the infantry and Marine Corps. You know what I mean?
I'm surprised to hear that the military didn't have any like formal help that you go through after something like that. I think maybe that was after your time there that it became such a push. Do you think if you had the same injury now that they would have the unit go through something, or you specifically?
Yeah, I know for a fact that now after you deploy, like I think it's any deployment, but especially like in scenarios where you're having to shoot your rifle or being attacked by the enemy in some way or shape or form, like you actually have to go and have those conversations and talk it out. So yes, there's definitely more things in place now for sure.
So I don't think you're ever like going to be cured from that, right? Like this is probably something you're going to deal with for your whole life. But how much of your like mental bandwidth does this occupy, and what does it still come back and cause issues for you, or do you kind of have it in its spot and you're good with it, or is it kind of like up and down, or what does that look like?
Yeah, it's still every day. I think about it every day. Every time I go to the bathroom, the scars on my leg and I see it. So, that thought comes up every day, and it's not that it's a bad thing. Like what we'll talk about later, like with my sergeant being killed, like I don't want to forget him. I want to make sure, he's remembered and he's not forgotten about. And so obviously I want to keep that at my forefront. So I almost have to think about it every day because I don't want to forget those events or forget him and what he did. Probably saved my life because he was the one in front of me. So those things I don't really want to forget about. So I have to think about it every day. So it's definitely always at the forefront. Some days not as much and some days more than others.
Moving on from there, I think what you're leading into is kind of what that led you down the road to for not only your career and your life, but also for kind of what you gain motivation and inspiration from, and then what you're doing specifically now as a remembrance and also as kind of keeping yourself moving forward from that. So go ahead and go into that stuff.
So regardless, I got a tattoo on my leg, making sure I don't forget the date. Somehow I get dementia or whatever. I can always look at my leg and be like, oh yeah, July 1st in the Arbor Body. Like what happened there? So I always have that. But basically ever since July 1st, after that in 2004, my initial ceremonial was every July 4th. Sergeant Condi's drink of choice was tequila. I mean, that wasn't really his drink of choice, but whenever he drank it, he got all crazy and had a good time. And so I just chose that to remember him. So every July 1st, I take a shot of tequila for him and then a shot of tequila for the flesh on my leg. And basically thankful that, I'm alive and I have a family and everything worked out. So that was the original thing I kind of started doing. And whoever was around me at the time, typically it was only my wife. So she was always having to take shots of tequila with me, just like the old days anyways. And then it kind of evolved to, if family was around, like they would start doing it. But recently, I started picked up mountain biking as a way to, stay fit and keep your brain busy and kind of kill some time in the mornings. Since I enjoy mountain biking, I kind of use that as a way to get guys together. So every July 1st now, I invite anyone else who wants to come. We get on our mountain bikes. We go for a good hard ride. Definitely not easy by any means. And at the very end, we all take our shots of tequila and then try to mountain bike back down the hill.
I don't know if that sounds like a great idea, but I like it anyways. Nice work.
Yeah. And then the other big part of that, September 11th, that was a huge event. To me, it's not just about the lives that were lost that day. Obviously, now I'm a firefighter, so having firefighter lives lost, means more to me now. But it's never been about all just the lives that were lost that day in September 11th. But we were all affected as a nation in different ways on that date. So for like me, example, September 11th basically carved my path in the Marine Corps. if it wasn't for that event, like I never would have ended up in Ramadi that day and so forth. So September 11th to me is not just about remembering the lives that lost. Obviously that was tragic, but we all were affected in probably some way, or we knew someone who maybe died after, from cancer, from being there, or other people who enlisted and then were killed later on. So that one event, kind of has all these different webs going off of it and how it affected people. So part of me wants to make sure that that date doesn't get forgotten about. So when I was in Los Alamos, New Mexico, I felt like I needed to do something there as well. So in New Mexico, obviously there's no high rises other than maybe Albuquerque, but I was hours away from that, so that wouldn't work. But we had our own ski hill in our backyard. So I was like, well, I'll make do with what I have. So instead of a stair climb, it was climbing to the top of a mountain. And it was still just as physically challenging as going up 110 flights of stairs at 10,000 feet elevation in full gear. And I definitely always remember in that event, it was super challenging. The last part of it was, steeper, probably the steepest portion of it. And then that's when it really made you struggle and have to push through it to get to the top. So I started that event there, and they're still doing it today. So I'm super proud of those guys continuing to do it, and also knowing that I started something there and it's continuing, even though I left. So that definitely helps me a lot. So when I came here to Ventura, obviously the first thing I started thinking about is how can I start another stair climb? Obviously the first couple of years of being here, I was pretty busy. And then it finally got to a point where I could kind of settle down and start thinking about how this is going to play out. And so the biggest building we have here in Ventura is the Crown Plaza, which is at the beach. It's not the best thing when climbing stairs, because obviously you have to go up and down several times to even match the 70 flights of stairs or the 110 flights of stairs. So I know a lot of guys were hesitant of, is it going to be challenging enough? Is it even going to be fun? Like having to go up and down stairs, like no one really wants to do that. They want to be cool and just, go up one building and be done, which obviously is the case in like Seattle where they have taller buildings and so forth. But I still wanted to try. For me, it's always still been more about the physical aspect of it and just bringing yourself to extreme exhaustion, basically, because that's one of the other reasons of how you can mentally check out, right? Is you're so physically exhausted, like you have nothing else to think about other than getting oxygen and finding water. So the Crown Plaza actually turned out to be a really great venue, and I'm super stoked that I went through with it and found it. I met with the general manager at the Crown Plaza, and he was all on board with it and super stoked to have us there as firefighters and obviously for the cause. So the Crown Plaza, it pretty much worked out to you have to go up and down the stairs 11 times, which would be like, the Twin Towers next to each other, making 11. That would actually equal 110 floors, which would be to the top of the World Trade Center. I know a lot of guys told me like the planes didn't hit the top of the building, they hit on the 70th floor or whatever. I was like, oh, so you're just going to forget about all those people who were above the planes? Like we don't care about them? Maybe the ones that fell all the way down? Like, that's not something I wanted to do. And I also wanted to make it challenging and painful and have to reflect and make it last. So I ended up doing with 110 floors, and it is absolutely challenging. Even for me doing it, I haven't been that physically exhausted in a long time. So that actually made me happy. I know it's probably hard to understand, but to be that physically exhausted where you can't even take like the next step up, like that's the mental challenge that I wanted to create, so people can reflect and understand like what other people went through that day or continued to go through that day. I wanted to bring that, challenge to it. So not only did that work out with the Crown Plaza, obviously they have a beautiful 12th floor, where you can, look out, you have ocean views, and they even provided lunch for us free of charge as well. So guys would finish their event, be super exhausted and have something to eat. So obviously this was the first year that it happened. I think it went really well, and I'm excited to have this every year, hopefully, given nothing happens.
Yeah, so the event, for all those who don't know, Will, he's in phenomenal shape, and it's not enough to go up to where the planes crashed. He wanted to go to the top of the building, and it's not enough to do that, so we had to go down as well. So I would say that to say that you didn't want it to turn out to be too easy is kind of funny. So it definitely isn't too easy, but this is all Will's brainchild that he came up with on his own just a few months ago. You were just kind of figuring out what we were going to do. And then on the day of the event, the amount of people that signed up and the amount of people that participated from all over, family members were able to come and do it with I think your kids even came and did it with you, right, Will?
Yeah. And that's the other piece of it that I wanted was anyone to come. I didn't want to make it just firefighters. I was super stoked, like how much the police department wanted to be involved. I was like, absolutely, I want you guys there. You lost a lot of lives too. So just being able to do it and to do it with my son and, other guys had their kids there as well. And I want the public to show up. Like I want them to be involved. And I think that was the biggest takeaway from that day, was just hearing from the public, like how much they appreciated it and how much they didn't understand, like how hard it physically is for us to get up the stairs in our gear. So just that alone, is a huge success to let the public know like what we do and how mentally and physically straining it can be.
I actually think it was a great idea to let anybody else, not just firefighters, come. But did we ever give any consideration to like if somebody wanted to climb with the weight of the gear, like, okay, here's the backpack. If anybody wants to experience what the firefighters experience, put this on and then go. Maybe that's something we do in the future, or what are your thoughts on that?
It's hard to do because the biggest part of having your gear on is just that heat retention. And so there's no way.
Well, I mean, the weight too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, it's that heat retention, like not being able to catch your breath because our EMS coordinator was freaking out because whether the thermometer was accurate or not, but she said our temperatures were like 200 degrees. And so I don't even know if that's possible. Like we all would have been medium rare and ready to eat, but
I just want to say that this event is a testament to you. And like you said, you don't ever sit down. For people that don't know Will and haven't worked shoulder to shoulder with him, he is literally the guy that will raise his hand and volunteer for anything and everything. There's nothing I don't think you have your fingers in or on at the department, which is awesome. It's also a huge commitment and a testament to kind of who you are. I got one story that I want to tell about you, Will. So we were on a call in your neighborhood. I don't remember if it was your street or the street next to your street. It was an elderly, I don't remember all the details. An elderly person had fallen, and we were there helping her. And did you show up? Did you come? I don't remember. Do you know what I'm talking about, Will, or no?
I don't think so. I think I would have remembered.
Yeah, so it was a routine medical call. An elderly person fell. I think it was across the street, like catty corner to you, because she was like, oh, Will's going to help me and Will this and Will that. And like, you're like the guy in your neighborhood that everybody kind of goes to and like you are willing to help them. And I thought that was super cool. Just that, again, is a testament to who you are and the type of person you are. But I want to say you showed up, like you came over and we had a conversation and you were going to follow back up after we left or something. But
probably, I think at this point, I've been to all my neighbors' house, either on the engine or just walking over because they came and asked for help. But
yeah, I mean, and that for our listeners, that's who Will is. Like you could literally probably ask him for help at any point and any time, and he would absolutely do it for you. So if you see him driving around on the fire engine, now you know a little bit more about him. I want to kind of reroute the conversation because you experienced, Jason was saying, a very acute form of PTSD. Like you were blown up. I mean, tragic. You're lucky you know that you escaped with your life. And that created a whole sequence of events that you continue to struggle with to this day, which, by the way, I applaud you being transparent and open and sharing, because I think it is important that people who are struggling with similar things, I don't know if we want to try to normalize it or just make it okay to talk about. But now you're in the fire service, and the fire service is unique. I would say doesn't really have those acute injury opportunities like the military does, although there are people who die, and we've had people die in the line of duty as well, but arguably a little bit different. But a lot of the trauma in the fire service is more chronic. Not that one's worse than the other, but you're in a unique position because you've seen both sides of it. You differentiate those two things in your mind, or how does it compare? Because you've seen both sides. They're both legitimate issues that deserve attention and resources and awareness. But just kind of curious on your take on the differences between the two.
So I think having experienced the Marine Corps side of the PTSD, I think I basically got that all out of the way as far as like not understanding it and how to deal with it, but dealing with it on my own way. So basically the depression part of it, trying to figure out what helps, what doesn't help. That's like a whole process in itself. So by the time I got to the fire service, like I already had it all figured out. But what I didn't understand was, all the things that we see on a daily basis as a firefighter, really how that would affect me. And so that does affect you in a different way. But I wouldn't say necessarily like it's a chronic thing in the fire service, because it only takes one bad scene to make it acute, or one bad patient that might just be your worst patient that you have your entire career. Like it could just be an acute one thing. But like I said, I think I figured out how to deal with it. I did therapy. I took all the free drugs from the VA and realized like none of that helped. The biggest thing that I probably didn't have access to that does help is being with the guys that were there on the scene. I talked to a few guys, obviously in the Marine Corps, like we have a group chat, but I don't talk on a daily basis, like with the guys I was there that day when I got injured. Basically, your lives get busy and so forth, but having that brotherhood and being able to talk about it is the number one thing that helps us for sure. So I think the fire service, we have that immediate response after these events where we can talk about it, joke about it, and figure out like how it affected us.
That's a good call. That the peer support team is exactly what you're talking about. And that's even next level from just after call going and hanging out at the kitchen table and talking with everybody. And as supervisors, we got to be able to recognize when our guys are in trouble and what the next level from the peer support team is going to be. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I know that, having the camaraderie and being at the station and after those calls is super important. What happens when guys retire, though, is that goes away for the most part. It's really hard to recreate that. Like you'll have your friend, and I'm speaking from firsthand experience, you have your friends that you still stay in touch with, but you're never going to go, once a week for 48 hours, go hang out with your friends. Like, it's just not practical. Like that's not how life works once you leave. And that going away from that causes a lot of firefighters to struggle, and because they lose that camaraderie, which is why it's important to shed light on it. Did you struggle more after you discharged from the Marine Corps with it, or was there not a noticeable difference whether you were in or out?
Oh yeah, after I got out, there was a huge decline in like my mental status and ability to function on a day-to-day basis. But like I said, it just took me a while to recognize it, and no one really recognized it who I was with. So it kind of took a while to realize I had a problem.
I think it's awesome that you're here talking about it with us, because just being aware and, like you said, recognizing like, oh, this might be an issue is, I don't want to say half the battle, but it's a big part of it. Like if you're at work and you see one of the guys is having issues, and a lot of times this stuff doesn't manifest itself as, oh, there's Will, he must be struggling from PTSD. It could be, oh, there's Will fighting with another guy, or not caring about his job anymore, or it just manifests itself, or drinking too much on his day off. Sometimes those things are hard to identify, but I think the more awareness we bring to them with things like this podcast and just the peer support stuff in general, the better we're going to be, because you don't have a ticker that goes across your forehead and says, I need help right now. This is what's going on. Like I wish it would be easier if that was the case, but unfortunately it's not. So
yeah, absolutely.
I applaud you for coming. Go ahead, Jason.
Oh, the only thing I got is we're all, like you were talking about before, Will, everybody in your neighborhood sees you as somebody that they can reach out to. And I think all these experiences that you have also lend itself to you being somebody who, whether you want to or not, people are going to look at you and go, that guy could probably relate to something I'm going through. It also could be the amount of plants that you have in your front yard that people can't ignore you. So I know that if anybody's in your neighborhood, they'll always look at you and know where your house is. And, I don't recommend picking any of the unusual fruits or whatever in your house, because as a Marine, I know you have 642 cameras and rifles. So I just wanted to put that out there too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who does the plant? Is it more your wife or you?
Yeah, my wife just plants it. I have no idea.
Gotcha. So for people that don't know, if you go to Will's house, you can't find the ground. Like literally every square inch of his front and backyard it's like a tropical rainforest almost. Like just every available inch is being farmed with some kind of plant.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I'm saving water by doing that. So
good.
Water
good. I want to talk about one other thing, Will. So I think we've established how your story, you're an amazing guy. You're a huge asset to the fire department. We're extremely lucky to have you just be here, part of our town, our community. It's wearing off onto your kids too. So I just want to praise you for the job you're doing with your kids, because your daughter did a little fundraising for the foundation. So would you be interested in sharing what that was?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously our kids watch everything we do, right? But I know she's got her own great little personality. She's super sweet. But one of the things she loves to do is swimming. And so she's always at swim practice. She's doing all these swim meets. And something that she got into recently is doing long distance open water swimming, which basically means there's events that you swim in the ocean or lakes or bays or whatever. But one of the ones she did was peer-to-peer from Hermosa to Manhattan Pier. Something around like 2 miles, I believe, is that peer-to-peer swim. But one of the things that she wanted to do and she brought up on her own, was could she raise money and awareness by her swimming? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Probably. Like, we can talk to the foundation and see if that's something that you can do. Like, by you swimming, raise money for the fire foundation. And so that's what she did. So I'm glad, like, that's one of the things as a dad, as a Marine, as a firefighter, like, when I'm gone, what legacy do I have if everything dies with me? So my whole point in all this is to make sure all this lives on well past when I'm passed away. So that's one of my goals. And, my daughter's already doing that. And I was actually upset with myself because she brought up one of the Marines who, took his own life, and she remembered his name. And I hadn't thought about him for a while. And I was like, kind of upset with myself, but at the same time, super proud that she brought him up. And that was one of the reasons she wanted to swim as well. So,
yeah, that's awesome.
No, that's awesome. I think as a dad, because I got 3 daughters as well, like, that's my number one job. It's your number one job, is to raise good children and turn them into productive citizens who can continue, like you said, what you started, and teaching them to be good people and helping and being charitable, all that stuff. But I think you're definitely an amazing example for your kids and for all the guys at the fire department and pretty much anybody you interact with. So it's been an honor to have you on the podcast, and super grateful that you shared your story and you opened up. And I think it's going to help, even if it helps one person, right? Even if it helps one person who's struggling with some of the same issues, then all of it was worthwhile. So a big thank you from the bottom of my heart, for sure.
We covered a lot of stuff today, and usually Peter and I are all over each other talking. And this time I'm just blown away again by hearing your story. So you're raising another endurance athlete and another volunteer. So that's really cool.
yeah, I encourage anyone to come talk to me and come challenge me with your sob story or, your experiences and tragedy. Obviously, you're not going to offend me, and I definitely will be able to relate in one way or the other. And the other thing about me, and I'm not a super huge talker, definitely a better listener. So you come talk to me. I'm not going to step over you or, impose my scenario or what happened to me, but other to listen and understand like your challenges and what you went through as I continue to go through that myself. So absolutely anyone listening to this or coworkers, even though I'm not on the peer support team.
Not yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, Will.
Yeah. Thanks, Will, for coming on. It was great hearing you share your story.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Good job.
Well, that was quite a story from Will Nackers. I've listened to that story before in person from him, and every time he tells it, I just sit here with my jaw drops going, okay, what's next? Even though I kind of know the outcome. What a unique perspective he has, being from the military, kind of retired from the Marines, so he has that retiree perspective, and then also currently being an active fire engineer with the fire department.
What blew me away about Will is he had obviously like this terrible thing happened to him, almost getting killed in an IED in Iraq. I mean, I can't imagine anything worse than that. But how he like commemorates it, like he went to his first fire department, created that mountain climb, and then came to our fire department. Now we're doing the stair climb, and it's all from him. So he's just an amazing guy, and the grit, he's got a great attitude. Like, a lot of people would have buckled under those same circumstances. And it sounds like he did struggle for a while, but just tons of praise for how he handled it and kind of where he's come from. And I think a lot for our listeners and other guys at the fire department to learn from as far as overcoming adversity, dealing with mental health issues. I'm excited that we're doing the podcast to get those kind of stories out. And these are the types of things that we need to celebrate. And the foundation is doing what it can to kind of bring awareness to these issues and get the word out there that it's okay. Like there's no shame in any of this stuff. If you need help, it's no different than if you have a medical condition that needs a doctor.
Absolutely. I believe it's 22 military a day right now that they say are committing suicide. And I know that that's kind of at the forefront of the thought of the military, and it's coming that direction for firefighters as well. So I'm glad we're covering that and bringing it to light, and make sure you reach out for help.
Obviously, this is brought to you by the Ventura Fire Foundation, and we are here as an organization to help people who are specifically firefighters and their families who are having issues like these. So if you are having issues yourselves, somebody who is, your family's struggling, please reach out to us. This is the whole point of what we're trying to do. We want to help and get people the help that they deserve. And there's so many resources out there. Frankly, a lot of it you don't have to pay for. There's so many other organizations that are interested in tackling these serious issues. But yeah, Will's great. The interview was great, and hopefully our listeners enjoyed as much as we did.
We'll see you again soon.